Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on Fat Burning Man, where we help you perform at your best. Do you use wearable technology to track your health data? How accurate is it? And most importantly, how can we use those data points to change our habits and create meaningful results in our actual lives? Whether you're collecting data from wearable technology or not, we're going to share a few simple strategies we can use to boost mood, productivity, and energy. Joining us today is Dr. Erik Korem, a high-performance thought leader in athlete tracking technologies and the founder of the AIM-7 app. Erik has his PhD in exercise science with an emphasis in sleep and nearly 2 decades of experience working with the NFL, college football, and even gold medal Olympic athletes. Erik is sharing some key insights into boosting productivity and energy levels, building adaptive capacity, what to do about all the data that your wearables are collecting, and a whole lot more. But before we get to the interview, are you ready for the holidays? There are just too many treats surrounding us this time of year to heed the naysayers' advice of don't eat anything delicious. So instead of giving up your favorite holiday treats like cookies, pies, and cheesecake, how about you make them guilt-free with real food ingredients? If you want our best squeaky clean, wild, paleo, keto-friendly recipes all in one place, I've got great news. We just finished putting together our ultimate cookbook bundle, and it's loaded with recipes for the holidays and New Year alike. We've spent years creating and gathering the best low-sugar, grain-free, real food recipes from our own collections of recipes, as well as some of the top chefs on the net, and everything is finally ready for you. The Ultimate Cookbook Bundle is packed with mouth-watering real food recipes that you and the whole family will love. Included in the bundle are 10 of our best-selling cookbooks, including The Wild Kitchen, Fat-Burning Chef, Wild Holiday Feasts with meal plans, Wild Holiday Desserts, Paleo Christmas Cookbook, Holiday Feast Cookbook, 50 gluten-free desserts, the Man Food Cookbook, wild sauces, dips, and marinades, and much, much more. These digital cookbooks include over 800 quick and easy recipes that will help you shed fat and take your health into your own hands. Blueberry cheesecake, smoked pork shoulder drizzled in homemade barbecue sauce, and much more are waiting for you on the inside. Many of these meals can be whipped together in 20 minutes or less. All the recipes are gluten-free, paleo, 100% real food, and no counting needed. Thousands of people all across the world are enjoying these recipes right now. Megan says, delicious. Time to impress friends and family for the holidays. Rebecca says, I love the pictures and the variety of the recipes. Frank says, seriously, this cookbook is my #1 first most used go-to. Aaron says, this looks so amazing. Sometimes the hardest part about eating healthy is all the prep it can take. Having quick, healthy go-to recipes is really the key to making real food a sustainable part of your lifestyle. With meals in under 20 minutes, there's no excuse to just pick something up. I love this. Vicky says, the bacon-wrapped meatballs were delicious baked on a bed of cabbage. The whole family loved them. We're also including 3 special surprise bonuses if you grab this soon. So if you'd like to get a huge discount on this collection of 10 wild cookbooks plus bonuses, all you have to do is go to fatburningman.com/bundle. Once again, just type in fatburningman.com/bundle, and we'll hook you up with a great deal on these 10 cookbooks. So you'll have a huge library of recipes to cook up incredible feasts this holiday and beyond. One last time, you can get all the goodies at fatburningman.com/bundle. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter for even more bonuses. All right, buckle up. In today's conversation with Dr. Erik Korem, we're chatting about a surprising way to boost mood and improve resilience to stress, fun activities for young people to build confidence and support overall health, simple strategies to sneak movement breaks into your day. That one's really important. How to build adaptive capacity and consistent peak performance, how to turn wearable technology data into actionable tasks, why you don't want to microwave your brisket, and tons more. Let's go hang out with Erik. All right, welcome back, folks. Dr. Erik Korem is a high-performance thought leader in athlete tracking technologies and the founder of the AIM-7 app. He has his PhD in exercise science with an emphasis in sleep and nearly 2 decades of experience working in the NFL, college football, and with gold medal Olympic athletes. Thanks so much for joining us today, Erik.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Right on. So I've heard you say before that having at least one meaningful conversation a day is extremely important for us humans. So let's start right there.
Wow, that's a really great place to start. Yeah, you know, I think the pandemic taught us a lot that we need each other. And when that time frame occurred, I was talking to some colleagues and I said, I bet we're going to see a bunch of literature tumble out of this on the impact of social isolation. And there was actually a paper done from the British Psychological Society that showed that people that had greater connectedness during the lockdown had less worry, fatigue, lower perceived levels of stress. It basically created a buffer against poor physical and mental health outcomes. And so there was a research that came out of the University of Kansas, the paper that you're talking about, that demonstrates that one meaningful conversation per day boosts your mood, improves your resilience to stress, enhances social connectedness. This can be everything from just like joking around, catching up, but I think it's more like leaning into sincere conversation, listening with intention, valuing somebody else's opinion. And the kicker on this whole thing is that digital communication didn't count. So text messages, that kind of stuff, DMs, like you've got to connect human to human. And this dramatically impacts our ability to adapt to stress.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's so interesting. Recently, a lot of kind of podcast oriented channels and X feeds or Twitter feeds, whatever it is, are asking like, what's your favorite part about podcasting? And the thing for me that I really love about it is that you get to have a deep, uninterrupted, for the most part, conversation with someone you care about. That's productive, and the uninterrupted aspect of it where you can really go deep and keep talking about something that's not at a surface level, that's not interrupted by bleeps and bloops of phones every 15 seconds is something that I find extremely valuable and very, very rare these days. It's not so often that you get to sit down with someone who literally wrote a book on a subject or has been specializing in something for 20 years, ask them whatever you want, and then share that with the world. But it's just one of those things, even if there aren't that many people listening to the conversations on the other end, in some cases, what a valuable way to spend time. At least that's how I feel. And so I would imagine that every time it would be a better conversation in person. But sometimes when you're talking to these people, it's very difficult to like get everyone in the same room. So I think there's something that happens in the middle of that too, where technology isn't all bad if you use it the right way. But 100%, if you can sit down and actually talk with someone with that sort of intention to go deep and not just talk about the weather or talk about things that people normally find themselves making small talk about, it really can enrich our lives. And the most important thing is how rare that is. We really have to engineer that back into our lives, especially post-pandemic, it seems.
I think that word or phrase, engineering it back into our lives, is critical. You have to be intentional about it. And, being a prolific podcaster, it's a basic rhythm of your life now. I also have a podcast, and I think we're like 350 episodes in. And one of the things that I enjoy is very similar, is that you actually have to, here's the cool thing. You research about somebody. You're digging in. And so when you come prepared to ask questions.
Well, hopefully, ideally.
Well, hopefully, right. And you're listening with intention, not just to say the next thing. And I think there's something, I haven't really thought about this. This is a really good observation, is that, when you go through that process, the conversations are so much richer. And if only we could do that and more in our day-to-day interactions. Absolutely.
That researching or reviewing that person's work is also something that I really enjoy. Just reading through books, looking through their podcasts, going deep into their work is something that a lot of people don't take that step. So if anyone's listening and they do have a podcast, like, try to embrace that, because what a wonderful way to spend your time. And it's the closest that I've come to going to school after I got my undergraduate degree, and we don't have to give up learning. And I think you're a great example of that, where there's always more to learn. But let's talk a little bit about this, because I've heard you talk about how athletes, especially younger athletes, seem to be weaker than ever before. Phones and technology are involved in one way or another. Obviously, technology is not all bad. Let's talk about that a little bit next.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't do physical labor like we used to. It's really interesting. Like, we have to deliberately walk. So like now we have these targets, like you need to walk at least 7,000 steps a day. You kind of start seeing this that's kind of the threshold for longevity. Anything above that's great, right? You have to hit a certain amount of moderate to vigorous physical activity and total body strengthening sessions, we know, to increase longevity. About 100 years ago or whatever it was, like you didn't have to think about that. Why? Because your life was evolved around picking things up, doing things. You didn't have as much technology to do these things for you, especially when we were more in an agrarian society or hunter-gathering society. It just happened. Well, now, like our children, we are training our children to be knowledge workers. Like you go to school to leverage your brain. That's how you make money. The problem is we're sitting in chairs all day. Our kids get maybe 1 hour of PE and then that's it. And so our kids are weaker than ever. We're starting to see childhood obesity rates climbing through the roof because, we have such hyper palatable foods. It's easy to get. You don't have to work for it. And so, yeah, our kids are weaker than ever. Like you would see, and it's really funny. They're like, oh, do you want your kid, you shouldn't have kids lifting weights before they're teenagers. Like, go work on a farm. Like pushing heavy stuff and lifting heavy stuff. It's lifting weights. You're not going to close your growth plates or anything like that. And so, our kids are moving and picking up stuff. And we do, I don't have them in there squatting at 7 years old, but we have things they pick up. We do little obstacle courses. We do jujitsu. We try to get them doing as much activity as we possibly can get them doing. Number one, for their overall health. Number two, it's confidence building, and it's functional for the rest of their life.
And building that sort of adaptive capacity makes you a lot more durable. So a lot of people don't think about exercise this way. Maybe we can kind of shift gears and talk about that next, because like you said, a few generations ago, it was just part of living that you had to move around at a relatively slow pace, lifting things that weren't giant weights, but you could kind of consider it resistance training in one way or another, except it wasn't explicit training. And now, when we're kind of raised in this new world, it turns out that most high school kids can't do one push-up, can't do like even a little bit of this work, but the value of the low and slow movement throughout the day has really been, I guess, swept under the rug or forgotten about a little bit. So now, once again, we need to bring up that word intention to try to put that into our own lives and the lives of kids as well.
Yeah, we call it microdosing. So like some people do, there's some really good research coming out of University of Texas about exercise snacks, where like you could exercise. Let's say you go do a 1 hour run. If you don't move enough during the day, you're not going to have the same metabolic reactivity to that session as far as like changes in blood lipid profiles, different things like that. So you've got to move frequently throughout the day. So there's some research on what are called exercise snacks. Every hour or even every half hour, get up, do 10 squats, 5 wall push-ups, just consistently moving every hour and a half. Go for a walk around the block, or if you're in an office complex, walk outside, go for a walk, just walk up and down the halls a little bit. We need to microdose exercise or movement into our day, and it doesn't always have to be just this 1 60-minute chunk of time, but we have to be intentional about it. And although it's a little bit aggravating, it could save your life.
And the benefits aren't just for your body. And I know that one of the reasons that I do it is because it makes you a lot sharper. And throughout the day, you kind of have ebbs and flows of energy, whether that's physical or mental energy. And especially when I'm dragging a little bit, there's nothing like swinging a kettlebell, right? 20 times, 30 times, just a little bit to get your blood flowing. You don't even need to necessarily break a sweat or do something really intense. Just moving a little bit, the benefits are insane. And it's amazing to me that so many people can just sit there for 3 hours. I've never been able to just sit down and not move
I go
for that
nuts.
long. It shouldn't be the norm, right?
No, I'm probably like you. I get stir crazy.
Absolutely.
I'm moving my desk up and down. I'll walk around my office. I'll, go outside. I just have to move or else I'll go nuts.
What would you offer to people who find that socially awkward? Because in a world where that's not really, I guess, the norm or the expectation at the workplace or in schools, how can we make that a little bit more achievable for people, or less socially awkward at least?
Yeah, that's a really great question. There's like water cooler breaks. People go walk down the hall. I would just say be more intentional about it. Like maybe there's a route in your office where it's like 5 minutes where you can walk down the hall, maybe go up a floor, move some, like nobody's going to question, like maybe they think you're going to the bathroom every hour or every 90 minutes. It doesn't matter. People take, well, back in the 80s or 90s, people still take smoke breaks, whatever, like just go outside, one lap around the building, take a phone call. I do, people are like, hey, let's do a Zoom call. I'm like, can we go old school and just do phone call? And then I put them on a headset and I'm walking. And people actually appreciate that. Can we have a walking meeting? And as long as, it's not in the dead of winter or you're here in Texas like we are in July and, whatever time of the year, it's a great way to just get some movement. And before you know it, you're racking up steps and movement and you just feel better.
It's funny you bring up the smoke breaks because I remember when I had my, first corporate job after college trying to pay off my loans. One of my best friends and actually my manager at the time, was kind of he was keen on smoking pretty often. Spent a lot of time in Europe, and it was very normalized for him. And I just found myself, I don't smoke cigarettes or anything like that, but I would take the smoke breaks. I'm like, you mind if I just come out and take a break with you? And we would have an awesome little chat. Spend like 10-15 minutes out in the sunshine. And it's interesting to me. I think that probably is one of the reasons that it's become less socially acceptable to take breaks, because those sorts of things have been kicked out, and rightfully so. I mean, people shouldn't be going out chain smoking all day, but taking breaks is one of the most important things you can do, not only for your health, but also for your productivity.
No question. Every 90 minutes or so, your body goes through an ultradian cycle. So you have a circadian rhythm, which is about 24-hour days, and you have these things called ultradian rhythms, which actually pattern match to kind of our sleep cycles as well. And so during the day, you have this natural rise and fall about every 90 minutes of alertness. And then then you kind of dip, you kind of have this trough. And so it's wise to work really hard for, let's say 90 to max 120 minutes and take a brief break. Your brain needs it. And then just decompress. And when you take that break, you shouldn't be focused on your phone because you don't want to bring your attention to something very small. You want to kind of go into portrait mode and just kind of just go for a walk and just take it in and just relax and then go right back to it. If you can do that 4 times a day, you're going to be significantly more productive than anybody else, and your boss or whoever your manager is going to thank you for it.
That's such a good point too. Yeah, because the tendency is, even for me, if you do take a break, it's like, oh, what's going on? I better check my messages. I better, see what is happening in the news. What's the weather doing? Is it going to storm tonight? But like you said, the value of the break is really in unplugging, even if it is just for a few minutes, so that you can let your brain rest, kind of restore itself, get energy for the next big thing that you go after.
100%.
So I've also heard you talk a bit about biohacking, and there are an endless amount of different things that you can try as far as that goes. Red light, cold plunges, EMF technologies, shocking yourself, whatever it is. But it turns out that that's really going after more like the 5 or 1%, the last bit of productivity or performance, when you can get 95% of the benefit just by exercising most days, right?
Yeah. I think that we lose. Man, it's clickbait, right? It's really easy to talk about a sauna and cold. Nothing wrong with those things, but
of course,
ultimately, what people are trying to do with that is what? Recover, right? I want to recover faster, or I want to, improve some type of mental resilience component so that I can perform at my best. Well, one thing we talk about quite frequently is building what's called adaptive capacity, or your capacity to adapt to more stress at less cost. And so most people think of stress as like your enemy, right? Like, I don't want to experience stress. Well, stress is actually the only way that you get better. If you want to get more fit, you have to deliberately engage in exercise, and exercise is what? A stress, because then that specific stress drives an adaptation. Same thing for work. If you want to learn a new skill or upskill yourself, you deliberately engage in learning. Learning creates neuroplasticity. Your brain changes and modifies itself. And so what most people, and I would say, miss out on is there's really 5 components to building adaptive capacity. There's exercise, sleep, mental fitness, nutrition, and fostering and engaging in healthy relationships, which we started out with. Those 5 things, the scientific literature is very clear, not only improve your resilience to stress, they build the capacity for more, but they also improve longevity. And so like we're focused on these little 1%, it's a half of a 1%, when really if we hit the big bucket things consistently over time, then those things, may be a silver bullet here or there. But even when I was working with pro athletes, like cold tubs, we actually had them stop using cold tubs because it actually blunts adaptation. And so we would only want to use it like after a game when there's significant inflammation to the body. Sauna, on and off here. But I'll just pause there because I'm in total agreement with you. Look, let's focus on the most important 5 pillars first. And then when we're consistent with that over time, then you can start layering those other things in.
So you working with athletes, some of them, it's pretty clear, can withstand an insane amount of stress. It's not always the ones that you'd expect, right? And some of this stress is just going out and drinking and eating the wrong foods. And then the next day, like they're not completely trashed, whereas some people have this, they're walking on thin ice all the time. And any little thing goes wrong and their performance is completely awful. So what's going on there exactly?
Man, we would, so my career as a sports scientist, we could measure these things. So we would, there's 2 types of load that we measure on the human body. Something called external load, which is what you did. So about 11 years ago, I pioneered the use of athlete wearable tracking technologies. If you've ever seen an NFL game and they're like, so-and-so is running 20 miles an hour down the field, that's the technology we brought from Europe. Or Australia. I was at Florida State when we first did this. And so we had millions of data points on these athletes. I had to hire a NASA propulsion engineer to like organize the data. It was crazy. But awesome. That's external load. It's what you did. That's like your Apple Watch saying you worked out this hard or you walked this many steps. Then there's internal load. It's how your body's adapting to stress. And then there's objective internal load, which is like heart rate variability, resting heart rate during sleep. And then there's subjective internal load, which is like how you feel. So I'm just a little sports science there for you. When we were looking at some of these athletes, we would measure several things. One, we would look at heart rate variability, which is an indicator of how the autonomic nervous system is adapting to stress. And then for my dissertation, I looked at something called DC potential, which is direct current potential of the brain. It's a slow cortical potential, which represents how the central nervous system is adapting to stress. So the CNS is the master governor. It manages all the subsystems below it. And so the central nervous system can give you a really good indication of power speed. It can give you an indication of how quickly somebody's going to learn. So we kind of look at these 2 things, and you're right. Elite athletes, I worked with several gold medal Olympians. We would crush them physically and mentally. They go have a very hard track session. And the next day it was like, boop, they're right back to normal. Now, over time, if you continue to just hammer them, there is a trend downward, just like any other person. But then like if like in football, we'd have like an All-American versus a starter in the SEC. And that All-American could go out and have a rough Thursday night, come in the next day, work out, and they look totally normal. The other guy is like completely trashed. Like you could see it in every single biological signal. Part of that is just how they're hardwired. Now, over time, stress will compound and everybody has a breaking point. And so what we wanted to do is we're like, okay, look at this elite athlete over here, the top 1%. How do we build that capacity into anybody? So elite performance is when preparedness and readiness meet. Readiness is the biological ability to perform. Preparedness is the technical, tactical. So you can think about it like this, like if you have a huge presentation to give? Are you prepared from the standpoint that you're ready to deliver it? And then biologically, are you in a position where you can give your absolute best? If you're training for a marathon or a 10K or whatever it is, a CrossFit event, it doesn't matter. There's preparedness, your skill, and readiness biology. So our goal was, how do we get both of these things to meet on game day so that you could have consistent peak performance? So those are the things that we were measuring. Some of it was biological, and then the rest of it was like applying these 5 pillars to build a bigger gas tank.
Yeah. So is that what it is, where the people who have reached that level of durability just have built that gas tank due to their training or their natural way of kind of going about it, or a great coach somewhere along the line, and those who haven't gotten there just need to build that gas tank? Or is there really a lot of we come out this way and one person is different from the other and some people are just more delicate? Like, how is there a percentage there for how much people can improve?
Man, these are great questions. With any capability, there's always a threshold or a ceiling and a genetic predisposition for success. So let's take speed, for example. There's the central nervous system wiring for speed. There's the muscle fiber type distribution for speed. And then there's the anthropometric setup of the bones and the joints and the angles and everything for optimal speed. Now, like for instance, Veronica Campbell Brown, who is an 8-time Olympic medalist, 3-time Olympic gold medalist. I worked with her for 14 years. She was gifted. Like, she was born with the ability to run fast, right? But she improved it over time, right? She trained. Now, I used to have coaches like, you can't make everybody faster. Yes, you can. If everybody has a bandwidth for improvement, and sometimes it's shocking how much more you can improve that. Now, there are some people that have really high natural IQs. They're going to be in Mensa or whatever. And then there's other people that just don't. But can everybody improve? Can they get smarter? Yeah, it's neuroplasticity. So I just don't think, one of the things I found was, if you imagine people being like a sponge with water in it, and their capability is like, you can squeeze all that out. I'd have athletes that they get to their senior year and there was still so much water left in the sponge. And we would go train them for a pro day or a combine, and they would just absolutely blow it up. And the coach would be like, why did this happen? Well, they were sleeping right. They were eating right. They were getting the appropriate types of training. They were doing mental fitness training. And so everything came together and they were able to produce these outcomes. Most people don't put it all together until it's like a seminal moment. And you can probably think back to times in your career where you had to be at your best. And so you kind of synchronized everything up. Well, what if we had just the remnants of all these things occurring at the same time at low doses, like kind of microdosing it into our daily schedule? What do you think over time would happen to our capacity to perform and be our best? It would just be through the roof.
Yeah, it brings back memories of when I was trying out for high school football, and I'm not a big guy. I was too small and too slow to do it, but it was amazing seeing some of these other guys who were like recruited from other parts of the country. This was back in New Hampshire, and it was like I was going out for tailback, and I thought I was running as fast as I could. And then literally the guy next to me is running twice as fast as I am. It was unbelievable. So when you're talking about building speed, how much of that is long-term work and how much of that is more like short-term conditioning?
Okay. So if you want to talk about how to develop speed, most people don't know how to develop speed. They do it completely wrong. You go out and watch these quote speed coaches in high school, and it's conditioning. Speed is a central nervous system driven quality. And so if you want to get faster, it's a very simple recipe. From a training perspective, you need to sprint, 90% plus of your maximum speed, and you need to have complete rest or near complete rest between sprints. So for every 10 yards or 10 meters that you sprint, you rest 1 minute. And people are like, wait a second, I sprint 40 yards or 30 yards, I'm going to rest 3 minutes. Yes, a good speed session may only be 6 to 12 sprints. And then you can't do this every day. because the central nervous system takes a lot longer to recover than maybe if you were to go do some zone 2 aerobic exercise. It could take 48 to 72 hours. So at the elite level, a really good 100-meter day, maybe we do some 60s, like maybe 2 or 3 60s, maybe 100 or 200. That's it. If we were to run a 200 or 400, if it's like somebody that's running, it could take 20 minutes between sprints. And so that's the only way you get faster. If you just sprint and then kind of walk back and sprint, you're just increasing the capacity of that system, not the power of the system. So every energy system has a power and a capacity, and you have to train them differently. So if you truly want to improve strength, typically, like for the first 12 to 18 months, anything's going to work, y'all. But then, like, if you really want to get strong, like, you're going to have to do things that are, an RPE of 8 to 9 or 80% plus, and then you're going to have to rest a couple minutes between sets. 1 to 5 repetitions, anywhere from 2 to 5 minute rest between sets, and you can increase strength. If you're going every 60 seconds, it's going to be very difficult to push the power or the maximum output of that system. Speed is the same way, parents. If there's parents listening to this, if you're paying for somebody to get your kid faster and they're going out there and just doing tons of agility drills and they're not getting any faster, they're just conditioning. And what you're doing is you're conditioning them to run at a slower speed, but maintain that. So the key is if you want to make somebody faster for a field-based sport, spend a period of time, 4 to 8 weeks, probably even 12 weeks of getting them faster maximally, and then follow that up with a period of time where you're conditioning them. So you increase the power, the ceiling goes up, and then the floor comes up with it.
That's such a great way to explain it. To carry on from that last story. So after playing football for 1 year, I decided to do cross country. And I was always more of a distance runner anyway. But after training for football and switching to cross country, it made me a way faster runner, even for longer distances. And so that training paid off in a bizarre way, but only after I pivoted.
There's some crossover to doing some true sprint work, strength work for long distance running. It can help you be a little bit more mechanically efficient and things like that. But yeah, especially when you're a young kid, like parents, like let your kids do multiple sports. Like unless age is a limiting factor, like gymnastics, where pre-puberty for girls, like they need to be at their best. Research actually demonstrates early specialization is going to hurt you. So do a lot of different things. Like Aaron Judge, I think, was a 3-sport athlete in high school. Like do a lot of different things, expose them to a bunch of different, movement dynamics, crawling, walking, running, jumping, throwing. And then over time, if they find something they love, then, let them do that. But let's all kind of recalibrate here. Your child most likely is not going to be a pro athlete or even a college athlete. It's just the way it is, right?
Sure. As it relates to the central nervous system, how do you manage those sprint days or working on speed versus strength-based workouts? How much time do you have to put in between, and how do you schedule that out?
Dude, man, these are good questions. I love this. This is bringing me back to my strength conditioning days.
Awesome.
Yeah. So there's certain we call them workload compatibilities. So speed feeds weights. I didn't come up with that term. That was Charlie Francis, the great sprint coach. So if you sprint, the days that you sprint, you should follow that up with power or strength-based activities. Okay. You will notice that when you go into the weight room, your weight session is going to be so much better because your central nervous system is ramped up. Okay. So, if you look at the most jacked athletes on the planet, 100 and 200 meter sprinters. And a lot of times we have to do a very minimal volume in the weight room because they can put on weight so fast. So sprint first, then do power, and then strength activities. And you could follow it up with a little hypertrophy. Do not do like lactic conditioning or anything like that on the same day that you're doing sprint work. They're competing adaptations. Your body's trying to adapt for one thing, it's going to be competing against another. Same thing with doing like zone 2 or just aerobic low intensity capacity work with lactic work, like high intensity lactic work, because what are you trying to do with aerobic work, mitochondrial biogenesis, capillary density. With lactic training, there's like different adaptations. Enzymatic changes are different, and so these are competing qualities. So don't mix those things.
Do you have to take a day off in between, or how do you space that out?
It depends on what the athlete is trying to do. So if we're training a true sprinter, we would follow what's called a high-low protocol. And we even did this in football for parts of the off season. So like, let's say Monday, Wednesday, Friday was high intensity sprints, jumps, throws, power, weight, strength training. Tuesday and Thursday, we would do things like extensive tempo runs, where it's like 60 to 70% max speed, aerobic in nature. We would do maybe some upper body hypertrophy training, a lot of mobility work. So you have this high CNS followed by low CNS and recovery. You're still working, but now you're creating space for adaptation. You're waiving the intensities. For a young athlete, you can do something called concurrent training. You can kind of do it all on the same day, and they're going to get better. But pretty soon, it just doesn't work anymore. And so that's what I recommend for power speed athletes.
Cool. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about all this data gathering, because there's more data gathering on our health than ever. People wearing rings, watches, straps, whatever it is. Yet, if you look around, it doesn't seem like a lot of people are actually benefiting from some of this data. So I've heard you say before, you and many other people, you have to use the data that's collected in an intelligent way to improve your performance and recovery, et cetera. So maybe you can just riff on that a little bit.
Yeah. So I'll tell you a self-deprecating story. When we first brought athlete tracking to the US, I went to Australia for a month and learned how they were using it. I was embedded with an Aussie rules football team. I come back to Florida State. Jimbo Fisher's the head coach. And I'm like, Coach, I think this would give us an advantage. Nobody had ever quantified the game of football. We were training for a sport that we didn't truly understand from a quantitative perspective. Now, from a tactical perspective, 100% brilliant coaches. So we're a week into this. We put these devices. They're like, look like, I don't know, about the size of a deck of cards. I'm duct taping them to the pads. Coach comes to me after a week. He's like, all right, Erik, how are we going to use this data? And I didn't have a meaningful response for him. And as you can imagine, that didn't really work out well for me.
Right.
And I was like, and that's when I realized that data without actionable insight is completely useless. And so it was only after about 9 months of tracking and measuring were we able to go, okay, this is what elite performance looks like. Now let's go back and reverse engineer training, et cetera. Same thing goes with somebody that's wearing an Apple Watch, a Fitbit, an Aura. It's just data. It's that first side of the equation of what did I do? And then even if you have like HRV, like how did I respond to it? The next question is what actionable step do I need to take to look, feel, or perform better? And that is where the struggle is right now. There's 120 million Americans that own a wearable right now, but they don't know what to do with it. And even the companies, like I wear an Oura ring, but Oura really doesn't tell me what to do. And then the worst part is like when the Oura or the Whoop or whatever says you're a 90 today, and you're like, I feel like crap. I'm a 20.
Right.
It's because they don't know how you feel. So wearable data is a lagging indicator for how your body's adapting to stress. So what I did in 2019, I got really curious about this problem. So as an academic, a colleague of mine at the University of Iowa, we sent out all these surveys to a bunch of universities. And we're like, what do people want from their wearables? And the number one response we got, this is interesting. They just wanted more energy. If this device could give them more energy, think about it. Think about the Starbucks market, like Red Bull, all this kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely.
We're like, okay. So we ran a pilot. Could we predict somebody's energy level with Apple Watch data and some very unique data sets? Not only could we do that, but we could predict their energy and mood state multiple days in advance. And we had these models externally validated by some experts in the specific type of methodology we used. And then we could identify, well, if this red flag triggers, then we know the action that they need to take. And so I left my career, my 16-year career, to start a company called AIM7. And that's what we do. We take your wearable technology data and we turn it into actionable recommendations for exercise, sleep, and mental fitness to help you, as we say, turn stress into strength, which rapidly improves fitness, reduces burnout, helps you thrive. And so if you don't have an actionable step or you don't have a way of using the data, it really can be annoying. And I follow a bunch of Reddit boards and I just listen to people, and there's a lot of frustration out there right now about like, what's the next step?
Yeah. And when you're the opposite experience is also really frustrating when you wake up and you're feeling great, and then you're getting chastised by whatever app is saying like, you're a 20 today. It's like, I thought I was 90. I guess I'll skip my workout, right?
No, and that's the wrong thing. It's like, so I'll give you an example how this plays out, right? So it's not that so you want to stimulate the body, not annihilate the body.
Yeah.
Stimulate, not annihilate. And sometimes the best way to recover faster is to stimulate the system. So for instance, and this is where these companies, although they're great, and I'm I champion, I'm wearing an Apple Watch and an Oura right now, they don't quite have the expertise like we had to build in the back rooms of these elite sport teams for over a decade, because it was what we had to do to win. So let's take, for instance, let's say your body's tired, right? Let's say your body, like HRV's down, you actually feel down today. Does that mean you should do nothing? Maybe not. If you feel like you still want to go to the gym, maybe you do a stimulative restorative circuit for 20 minutes to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is going to actually stimulate recovery. Maybe there's a mental fitness intervention you could do from a breathwork perspective. Then you need to go, okay, like what compensation should take place from a sleep perspective? Maybe you're stressed. Maybe what you really need to do is engage in some type of gratitude or mindfulness intervention so your system can come back online. And the last thing you ever want to do, and I learned this mistake the hard way, is we would tell an athlete, hey, you shouldn't do this today. And they're like, yeah, forget you, I'm done. If you ever tell somebody you can't do something, like that's a surefire way to get them to turn off the app or to turn off the coaching recommendation you're trying to deliver. So what you have to do is just pair the right stimulation for the how your mind and body is adapting to stress. And that's the hard part. And that's what we do.
And heart rate variability in particular is something that people talk about a lot, but it's not that well understood. How do you use it? How do you explain it to people? And what is it actually measuring?
Yeah. So heart rate variability is a time domain analysis. What you're doing is you're measuring the variability between heartbeats. So if you've ever seen an EKG where it's like beep, beep, that spike is when the left ventricle of the heart is contracting and ejecting blood, right? So that's heartbeat. That's what you're measuring, right? And what you're doing is you're looking at the milliseconds between those beats. And there's two parts of the autonomic nervous system. There's the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. The sympathetic has nothing to do with sympathy. It has to do with a bundle of nerves. So the parasympathetic is like the brake system. Okay. The sympathetic is like the gas, right? So people talk about fight or flight. When your body is under stress, first of all, stress isn't a bad thing. We talked about that. It's your brain and body preparing you to do something effortful. So like if we're on this podcast, I would bet if you measured my HRV, it's gone down a little bit, right? My heart rate's gone up. I'm tuned in. My heart rate's up a little bit. Respiration rate's up. I'm focused. I'm dialed in. If I want to go to the gym, that's great. If I want to go get work done, that's awesome. But you don't need to be stuck with the gas pedal down all the time. So when HRV is lower than your norm, that means you're more in this sympathetic gas pedal down state. When your HRV is a little bit elevated, it means you're in the brake state. Now, here's where most of these wearables go wrong. They over-index on when they see a spike in heart rate variability. A lot of time, and I've documented on social media, I've shown people, like Aura or Whoop or whatever, my HRV will go through the roof. And it's like, yay, today's the day to go crush it. Typically, it's after I've traveled and my body's exhausted and it's saying, stop, Erik, chill out. They get it completely wrong. And this is actually in the literature. So what you need to do is you need to look at your norm and then you need to know what a significant deviation is from the norm. And so HRV is just part of the equation. So if you were, let's say, going to go do a resistance training session today and your HRV was out of the norm up or out of the norm down, maybe instead of doing 4 sets of bench press at 85% or an RPE of 8 or 9, maybe you just do 1. You warm up, you do 1 hard set, you stimulate, not annihilate. Or like what we do in AIM 7 is we look at the things that you like to do. Maybe you like to lift weights, maybe you like to do the elliptical, or you like to row or whatever. Then we'd be like, hey, here's the optimal one today. So maybe instead of doing resistance training, you can still go do it, and here would be your plan. Maybe you should go do some zone 2 for maybe 20% less than your typical session for 30 minutes and just stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, and then go do this mental fitness intervention to bring your body back online. So HRV, it's a really good indicator of how your body's adapting to stress, but I would give you one more caveat on how to use it. Make sure it's done always at the same time, every day at the same conditions. So the Apple Watch measures it at just totally weird intervals. It'll measure at 1 a.m., at 4 a.m., at 6 in the afternoon. And so there's these apps out there that are like making recommendations off of this, and it's not even scientifically valid. So what we do is we actually have people put their finger, we have a technology in our app where you put your finger over the camera lens when you wake up for 1 minute, and it measures heart rate variability at the same time every single day under the same conditions. You don't even want to drink water before you measure HRV because it can elevate it. So best way to do it is laying down under complete rest, no coffee, go get up and pee and lay down. If you have an Oura Ring, it's measuring it during sleep, which is great. I know some Fitbit devices now are doing it 24/7. You only want to look at probably the sleeping periods. If there's a device out there that's saying it's measuring it during slow, deep sleep, that's totally bogus. You can't even do that. So does that help?
Yeah. Oh, it totally helps. What about heart rate more generally? Because sometimes there are different ways that different apps and devices measure that. But how much does that enter into the equation?
Yeah. So a really good way to look at how your body's adapting to stress is to measure your morning heart rate, or to look at heart rate during sleep. So if your heart rate is elevated, it means your body's trying to circulate more fluids. Typically, it could be dehydration, or it could be that your body's trying to circulate things to address some type of dominant need. It's fighting off a foreign invader, so it's circulating more white blood cells, or maybe there's a hormonal reason. So if you wake up in the morning, your average heart rate is 60 beats a minute, and you wake up the next day and it's 68 or 70, you could be like, that's interesting. Maybe my body is a little bit stressed right now. Typically, if you see an increase in heart rate, it's usually paired with a decrease in heart rate variability. So we look at resting heart rate during sleep, not during the entire day, because we're trying to look at when your body is in a complete state of relaxation, how is it adapting to stress?
Very cool. Let's talk about sleep more specifically now. The relationship between depression, anxiety, stress, and sleep. It seems like a lot of people skip over that part. They want to treat the symptoms with something else, but you can actually use a lot of this sleep data. Some of it's better than others, right? But you can be more strategic about how you're sleeping and prioritizing that to really fix a lot of other things that may be happening in your life around anxiety and stress. So maybe you can go there next.
Yeah. So, first of all, I think if you're looking at any of the sleep stages from your devices, please completely ignore those. The research is pretty clear that they're not accurate. I actually developed a site. I'll give it to you if you want to put it in the show notes. And I had a postdoc student or a doctoral student work with me and somebody else, and we created this site, Accuracy of Wearable Technology and Smartwatches. And if you Google that, we're actually number 1 in Google right now. And what we do is every month we update that. We're not, we don't have one favorite device over the other, but we just publish the current, what does the current literature say about the accuracy of these devices? The only things you should really be looking at are duration. So when you go to bed, and duration, how long you slept, onset, when you went to bed, and how consistent you are. So yes, duration is important. 7 to 9 hours is a critical time frame. And if you're that person that's like, no, I do really great on 5 hours, you probably don't have that genetic polymorphism. So please just like don't try to go there. Most of us overestimate our sleep by about a half an hour. So 7 to 9, the literature shows there's a U-shaped curve in relationship to our risk for type 2 diabetes, even all-cause mortality. If you want to know how a behavior impacts human system, look at twin studies. So there was a study of over 21,000 twin pairs over 20 years, and they found that the twin that slept less than 7 hours per night had a 24% increase in all-cause mortality.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty crazy. So there's duration, then there's onset, and there was a paper that was done with over 800,000 people in the UK Biobank. And what they looked at is they looked at over 800,000 people. Yeah, for the UK Biobank, it was with MIT, Harvard, and the University of Colorado. And this came out, I believe, in 2022. And when they looked at the paper was trying to look at people's evening, like chronotypes, evening and morning types, right? And what they found was pretty interesting, though. People that went to bed earlier and woke up earlier had a significant reduction in major depression. As a matter of fact, if they shifted the midpoint of sleep back 1 hour, so let's say you went to bed at 1 a.m. and now you go to bed at 12, if they shifted it back, they had a 23% reduction in major depression.
Wow.
If it was 2 hours, it was almost 40%. Now they had 23andMe genetic data, actigraphy data, diaries. I mean, this is a very robust study. And the authors were like, okay, what could be driving this? And it all came back to one thing. So my doctoral work was in sleep. And the first thing we learned about the drivers of sleep, there's a homeostatic drive, which means that you wake up in the morning, hopefully you feel refreshed. And as the day goes on, there's a sleep hunger. Adenosine accumulates and your body becomes more tired and fatigued. And if you drink caffeine, it kind of blocks those adenosine receptors for a little while. The other thing is there's a circadian drive, which means about 24 hours. And there's internal timekeeping machinery that is anchored by what are called Zeitgebers or time givers. The most potent one is sunlight. And they found that people that go to bed early and wake up early have more natural exposure to sunlight. And when you see sunlight, it activates a bundle of nerves that activate this thing called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It sits above the roof of your mouth. It's called the circadian pacemaker. And that sends a signal to all the cells in your body by increasing temperature, spiking cortisol. It's now time to be alert and awake. And then about 12, 16 hours later, start increasing melatonin. All of that has to do with when you go to bed. It's pretty amazing. You get more sun exposure. And then the last thing I would say is consistency. So we have duration, when you go to bed, onset, and consistency. You want to have a consistent sleep-wake routine during the week and on the weekends. Now, be a human, go out on a date or whatever, but you don't want to have like consecutive nights where it's just totally off, because then you get something called social jet lag. And that's where you just feel awful on Monday morning. And if you repeat this consistently over time, it increases your risk for cardiometabolic disease, depression, weight gain, all sorts of stuff. So 7 to 9 hours is ideal. In bed and asleep before midnight, and just have a consistent sleep routine. The REM and deep and all that will take care of itself for the most part. Unless you have an obstructive sleep apnea, then you're going to need to see a medical professional. But I would not be worried about what your device says about your deep sleep right now.
Cool. That's really valuable. What about, you say 7 to 9 hours of sleep, and the different devices will spit out different data in terms of saying you're in bed for 9 hours, but you only slept 6.5 or whatever. How accurate is that? And are you talking about like measured sleep in that window, or what does that look like?
Sometimes these devices have like awakening periods at night where it says you're awake because of the actigraphy. It's measuring movement at the wrist. I would look at more when you went to bed, when you woke up. It's pretty accurate for those things, within 15 to 30 minutes of accuracy. And most of these devices are consistently inaccurate with the same amount of inaccuracy, if that makes sense. So it's a trend line. But like before Aura updated their new algorithm, it said I was awake all the time at night. I'm like, I am not awake.
Right.
Like, this is not real. But I would look at when I went to bed and when I woke up, then I would just do the rough estimate. And then one thing that we actually include in our algorithm is like how you felt about your sleep. There's actually research showing that your mood and different things during the day can actually impact your sleep quality, and how you feel is really critically important. Because a lot of times, like, these devices can get you totally wrong. You could have been there laying there staring up at the ceiling and had just one of those nights, and the device is like, "You're a 90 today." And you're like, "No, I didn't sleep last night. I was worrying." We're human beings, and that's the limitation of these devices.
That is such an important point too, that all of these devices are missing how we actually feel. It's measured all of this stuff, but they'll never really know unless we, I guess, manually put that in or work some system.
That's what we do.
Doing so. Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense.
I'll tell you something we found in sports science that was interesting. We used to want to know, are our athletes stressed? So we would take cortisol measures. Are our athletes sore? We would take creatine kinase, all these biomarkers. And then we started finding out, you know what, if you just ask them and then you do the right math, it was directly a sensitivity of like the variation in their answers was directly related to biologically how they were adapting to stress. So we no longer had to take all these biomarkers. So what we would do is we would start looking at that plus the wearable data or objective hardware that was on the athlete during the game. That's what we do at AIM-7. We have this thing called the calibration. And it's actually really interesting if you do this on a frequent cadence. If you just take a minute to sit there and think about how you feel, it starts developing something called interoception, which is a very important capability of understanding what's happening internally. How is my mood? How do I feel today? That's a really important quality for mental health. And so that was kind of a byproduct that we didn't realize. And as we've been doing this, people were like, I love taking a minute to think about how I feel. And I'm like, duh. Well, I mean, sometimes the obvious things sitting in front of you, but I just challenge people to do this on a frequent basis, because you'll start to pick up on subtle cues that maybe were just kind of sitting in the back of your mind.
I love that. We're coming up on time. I have so many things I want to talk to you more about. Maybe you can just talk for a quick second about why you shouldn't put your brisket in the microwave.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Texas. You live in Austin. The hardest meat to cook is a brisket. So every barbecue joint is basically judged on their brisket because it's so hard to do. And I think what you're referring to is we talk about slow cooking it and never getting far from it. So if you invited me, Abel, over to your house and then you threw a brisket in the microwave, first of all, I'd be like, what a jerk. Then it would taste like garbage, right? It'd be chewy and gross. And if you microwave brisket, you're going to get a microwave product. If you microwave your body, if you try to do, so much stuff at one time, you're going to end up with a microwave product. You're going to get hurt. You're going to burn out. So consistency always beats intensity over time.
I love it. Erik, what is the best place for people to find your work in the AIM-7 app?
Yeah, so aim7.com. That's where they can learn about the AIM-7 app. They can download it from the App Store. But I actually put together something for your audience as like a special opportunity. If they want to try it out, if they go to our website and they use this code, let me get it here really quick.
It's all good.
Yeah, FBMA7. They can use AIM-7 for a 7-day free trial and use it for $1 for their first month. And when this comes out, we will have exercise programming in the app that adjusts daily to how your body's adapting to stress. So it connects with your wearables. You want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, at Erik Korem. That would be great. I'd appreciate that.
Awesome. Erik, this is so much fun. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely. I need to get you on my show.
Right on. Let's do it. Hey there, thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the Fat Burning Man Show. Before you go, please hit like and subscribe, or even better, leave us a quick review, which helps other people find their way to this free show. We've recorded over 400 episodes of this award-winning show over the past decade and change, and you can watch every single episode for free at fatburningman.com. So if you can think of a friend or a family member who might enjoy and benefit from our work, please take a quick second to share it with someone you care about. Thank you so much for all of your reviews, comments, likes, emails, and the kind words you send our way. We couldn't do any of this without you. Now, a quick disclaimer. The Fat Burning Man Show provides general information and discussions about health and related subjects and is not intended as medical advice, nor is the information a substitute for professional medical expertise, diagnosis, or treatment. If you or any other person has a medical concern, I wholeheartedly encourage you to consult with your healthcare provider. Now, before I sign off, don't forget to join our newsletter at fatburningman.com. When you sign up with your email, I'll send you a wild quick start guide along with a few of our ridiculously tasty recipes. This is Abel James signing off. Thanks so much for listening and have a great week.